Good afternoon. Welcome to the 37th CALLERLAB Convention. Today is Tuesday, March 30th, 2010, and this is the newer caller tips. I'm John Swindle, your moderator, and my panelists are Paul Henze and Ron Markus. Paul Henze is from Chattanooga, Tennessee, started calling in 1978, joined CALLERLAB in 1986, and became an accredited CALLERLAB coach in 1998, and he is also the chairman of the CALLERLAB Accredited Caller Coach Committee. Ron Markus is from Tucson, Arizona, started calling in 1971, joined CALLERLAB in 1989, became an accredited CALLERLAB coach in 2007. I am not an accredited CALLERLAB coach. That's why they made me the monitor. Is it monitor? Moderator. Forgot to look at my badge. I started calling in 1968 and joined CALLERLAB in 1975. I don't know a whole lot about their CALLERLAB curriculum, but I can tell you when I first started calling, if I made a mistake, I admitted to it. And I have gotten a lot of compliments from dancers then and all the way through my calling career, because most callers, they make a mistake, they blame the dancers. That's not good. You got to keep their faith in you. When I teach a class, I deliberately make a mistake when I first start the class. That's when I make a deal with my class. I tell them, if you don't get mad at me when I make a mistake, I won't get mad at you when you make a mistake. And we get along real well from then on. We've got, I don't know what are y'all got a bunch of stuff you want to do, or are we just going to do stuff and then take answers, questions?
Well, we have stuff we can talk about.
All right.
You have anything prepared, Paul?
Okay, I'll turn this over to Paul Henze.
What I'm going to do is I want to ask a couple of questions, and I think then we're going to turn it back to Ron before he comes back to me. Help us out here so we'll kind of get a best idea of how we can be of help to you and the crowd. How many of you have just started calling in maybe the first year? So we've got 3, 4 here, okay? How many have been calling 5 years or less? That's everybody else from that standpoint. How many of you have been to caller schools? Great. This is generally not the thing that we see. So at least we've got a common teaching point that we can all look at from that standpoint. So we want to try to center the thoughts, and it's not just what we're going to be presenting up front. We want to hear from you guys too, so that you can give us some ideas and feedbacks. Hey, my first couple of years, this is what I ran into. Here's one that I hear quite often. I can't get local callers out of my area to help me. Have you heard this in your area? Okay. We've got to work around some of those thoughts. How many of you have mentors in your programs that you're working with right now? Is this a person that's signed on with you and through thick or thin will work with you and stay with you? Okay, because when you work with a mentor, you've got to accept, number one, will they have the time for it? And number two, will they spend the time that you need to work on some things? Number three, will they let you teach? Okay. What we're trying to do is trying to establish something. Does this mentor talk with you as you're going up and coming back? Or do you ride with this mentor? Do you physically go to his house or her house, meet you at a common point, and for the half an hour going to the dance, you go with him and you talk, and after you come back and you've called your tip, does he talk with you on the way back? Okay? I'm just trying to get some food for thought in your mind, because these are things that we're working on in the caller coaching program right now as a mentoring program. We are finding, and you know yourself as well as I do, what are we getting less and less of on a yearly basis? Dancers. And if we got less dancers, we're going to have less callers. And we've got to start working on this. And you are the core group that's going to be our answers in the years to come. People like us over periods of time for a number of years, guess what? We're going to be off the scene. We just don't have the physical capability. The legs start giving out. Minds start working. Well, I was talking about Ron. So those things are going to start happening. So we're just trying to get things warmed up in your mind. Before I get started, we can get a pretty good idea of the floor about where we stand. Here's Ron.
All right, thank you. What Paul said is right. You just can't keep doing things over and over and over forever and ever. And the more I want to think I'm still 35 years old, I'm not. But so that's why you guys are so important. Thank you for coming. I just want to go over the approach I took to this newer caller tips is things you need to know about. And it may be a little bit overwhelming, but I don't want you to think you have to know about all of these things now. These are things that will come to you and that you should be aware of that are part of your craft, part of what dancers expect you to be able to do. They expect you to be able to understand timing. How much time does a call take, and how much lead time, how much command time, how much execution time is required? You know, the lead time before you give it, the command itself. How many beats does it take to say the command? And it is things that require some study and require going to a color school or a specialized kind of weekend that maybe a color coach is giving in your area, and to deal with your mentors. Body flow, don't call centers in and bend the line. It's just stop start, and it makes people tired. Body mechanics, which way is the body already moving, so you keep it moving in that direction. All the business of formations and arrangements, and you can try to memorize these things, but it's best to recognize them, I think, rather than try to memorize the 1/2 formation the 1/2 arrangement in this formation is this. Recognize them rather than memorizing what they are. You need to memorize some things, of course, but not that sort of thing. You need to be familiar with them. You need to be able to recognize them and moving from one to the other, quickly and smoothly from one to the other. The whole business of phaser, formation, arrangement, sequence, and relationship, that all needs to be, an understanding needs to be developed for that. Has anybody ever heard that phrase before, phaser? Those of you who went to college schools, I'm sure you've heard it. Okay. It is not something that's used on the Star Trek Enterprise. It sounds like it, but it's not. Not near as deadly.
You said razor, didn't you? Shave with.
Right. Anyhow, those are all things you need to be familiar with, and especially like the common formations, a zero line, a zero box, a cross the street box, a lead right box. Have you all heard these formations? And could you move them? Can you move dancers from a static square to a lead right box in one call? Of course you can. So it takes a little bit, maybe more to do it, but knowing and understanding. Not necessarily memorizing how to do it, but knowing and understanding where the dancers start with and where the dancers start and where dancers end. If you're going to call something, you need to know where it starts and where it ends. Otherwise, the dancers are going stop, start, stop, start, stop. And then after about 15 minutes, everybody wants to go home because they're so tired from stopping and starting. So that's smoothness and timing needs to be something to be concerned with. Methods of choreographic management, understanding what phaser means and the importance of it, moving smoothly from one state or one place to another, one formation to another, and knowing if you call something, if you call square through, right and left through, veer left, where are they? Well, they're in a two-phase line. So you need to know that's where they are. And being in that two-phase line, what can I call from there? And when I call that, where are they going to be and what am I going to call next? So it's you had to anticipate it. Do you have a question? Yeah, okay, there's a lot of things you could call from a two-phase line in almost any program. But if we stick with the mainstream program, you get them into a two-phase line rather than looking at them and saying, oh, you're in a two-phase line, let's see, I can call, okay, chain down the line. And what can I call next? Two ladies chain, flutter wheel. Well, by this time, they're already worried that this is going to be stop-start, not a smooth dance. So you need to be able to familiarize yourself with and be familiar with where a call puts a group of dancers without looking at the floor. Being able to visualize that, it's kind of tough for a lot of people to do that. Being able to visualize from call to call to call where these dancers are going to end up. Music, certainly that's very important. How music is put together. What's rhythm? Is it Latin? Is it reggae? Is it boom chuck? Is it any number of different possibilities for it. Melody, harmony. especially if you work with another caller, which maybe some of you have, maybe some of you haven't, I don't know. But who's going to do the melody? Who's going to do the harmony? And are we going to switch at some point? You know, some amount of preparation is not a bad idea if you're doing that. Mood. You can use the music that you use can make or break a mood. Everybody can be, oh, wow, yes, sirree. And then you put on something like Misty. It's kind of not the right choice for maybe that play, or not the right choice for that place in the dance for that kind of music. Be aware that music can make or break the mood. You can change the mood from high to low or low to high, and any number of different things. Keep in mind that can happen. And types of patter records you use. Do you want to, wow, wow, boom, 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 get rhythm type of thing, or do you want to, what's the other one, boogie beat? You don't want that kind of thing, or do you want something smooth and easy? At this point in the dance, that's programming, is what that boils down to. Teaching, of course, being familiar with all the calls and all the definitions. And you can download the definitions from the website, the CALLERLAB website, and it's like 50 some odd pages long, I understand, but that's a resource you need to have. And it's also something you can download and print 1 page or 2 pages at a time, so you don't have to go starting the printer and then come back a half an hour later and get your 55 pages and, oh my God, it jammed on page 27. So, but you could print it off a page at a time and use your call analysis sheet. Do you know the call analysis sheet? You went to the caller schools. You saw that in your caller schools. No.
No, I
Hold. I'm sorry.
Don't you have a portable one?
Yeah, we got one somewhere, don't we?
Ted Rotwood, Bluebell. I went to the first caller school, and they showed me this call, and it was an exercise. I had to go fill it out, and it's like a full page, and there's 15, 23 different questions about a call, and I came to some of the aspects, and I just had no idea about how to answer it. I just sort of gave up. And my initial thing was, why does every new caller have to work out all this stuff? Why doesn't somebody do it once and we learn? And I realized part of it's a learning exercise, but part of it I didn't know enough to understand the questions to be able to answer some of the questions about a call. So I just decided to decide what can I relate to, and I took 1 or 2 aspects of calls, and I did all the calls for that, and so I sort of did it horizontally instead of vertically, and I still haven't gotten back to all the things, but some of the things.
It sounds like you were maybe at a point in a caller school where you were being overwhelmed by this piece of information, and what do I do with it?
No, it was a knowledge-based study.
Oh, it was.
Right.
Well, I don't think I was overwhelmed from a reasonable standpoint. I just didn't have enough. Everybody's different. She might have looked at it and said, I don't have any problem with body flow and handedness. I was coming up with, what do I write down for the handedness of this particular call? And I didn't know what to put down, or body flow. What's the body flow of a pass-through? And I didn't know how to describe what I was supposed to, put down. So, it's just a matter of I know more now than I did back then. But and I still have that feeling of, I just said, I'm going to take hours and hours and hours and hours and hours to do this, and I've got a class to teach. And I realize it's useful to know all that information, but I couldn't do it for 69 calls.
No, I understand that. That's a nice to do. 69, all 68 mainstream calls, including a call analysis sheet for, is a wonderful goal, but it's almost dreamlike. But we use them in caller schools because we wanted people to understand that if you're here, you can go here, you can also go there. And here's a way to get from point A to point B in this call analysis sheet. And if you have questions with it, especially if you're in a caller school, ask the coaches who are there. Say, wait a minute, I don't understand what they mean by this, or what does this term mean? And if you can't fill that out completely, well, that's okay too, because the idea is to be able to go through this thing with the coaches and understand what the questions that are being asked to get information for yourself.
Let me point out one thing for you, too. If you look at the sheet itself, on the call analysis sheet, we just did this in a previous class just a minute ago. There's 3 things on there that you need to have available to you, so this way you'll be able to refer to it quickly. Number 1 is the formations. Through CallerLab, you can download the formation sheets, and it'll give you front and back if you order it, or to give you two sheets for that. Number two you're going to need is the arrangement sheets, and there's 7 sections of that, 7 sheets of that. And the third thing is going to be a timing sheet, timing for the mainstream itself. To look at those 3 initially is going to be like, wow, here it is, just like you mentioned initially. But what it does is it gets you strictness in your mind so that you can see physically what each call is going to put up here. And that's the biggest thing initially, is the computer up here to start centering on a particular call. Granted, it's tough. How many of you just jumped into calling the first day and everybody clapped you off the floor and paid you $85? Oh, another question.
I'm Barry Clasper from Toronto. I can sympathize with your position completely. I'd been calling for a long time, the first time I saw one of these call analysis charts, and I looked at it and I thought, I can't answer all those questions. And I mean, by then I'd probably been calling 15 years before I ever saw that. And I could site call, and I wrote choreography, and people didn't complain about what I was doing. And after my initial fright, I looked at this and I thought, well, what's it really trying to do? And what it really comes down to is, when you're creating choreography, you have to have a mental picture of what the call is going to do. You have to have a mental picture of how the dancers got into the state that they're in now, and then what the call is going to do to that state as it progresses. Now, not everybody can write that down. I was creating choreography by picturing what I expected to happen. I'm not saying I knew where everybody in the square was and I could tell you exactly, here you got a square 3 feet or an element left or whatever. But I knew what the formation was. I knew how the dancers were moving. And I had that in my head, and that's how I was creating choreography. Paul's point, I think, is that it seems daunting when you look at all this stuff and think, well, I've got to write all that down and document it and catalog it so that I can have notes that I can look at or something, study from. The fact is, if you've been dancing for a while, you've already got a lot of that stuff in your head. You just have to start to tap into the parts of that knowledge that matter when you're calling. And as Paul said, it's really relatively simple. Like, you need to know where you could start a call from. You need to know what the action of that call is, and you need to know how that call ends. And by end, I don't just mean it ends in facing lines. I mean, it ends after you've done a quarter turn to the left around the center of the couple, so that you've got some idea what the axis of rotation was for the motion that they had. You've got some idea what handedness they were using, and it starts to go back to the stuff that's in here. But you'll find if you've got a mental image of how the call works that's accurate, that you've actually got a lot of that stuff in your head already. And what you need to write down is what helps you remember that, or what helps you think about that. Everybody's brain works differently. And one of the things I discovered when I started going to caller schools was that a lot of times the instructor's brain didn't work the way mine did, and I had to come up with the tricks that helped me, and take the stuff that they were offering that made sense to me, and where something they were offering didn't make sense, I had to figure out how to do it in a way that did make sense to me.
2 more questions here, and then we'll move on back to Ron.
Rich Delgado, New Jersey, and I'll comment. I wound up teaching an advanced class that Mike Jacobs had started before he died. So that was a perfect opportunity for me to start doing call analysis on the calls that I'm teaching. So every week I'll look at the list and pick the calls that I'm gonna emphasize the next week, and I'll do a call analysis on them before I start writing on a teach program for that. And that's probably where somebody that's teaching a class wants to start. You'll watch your dancers as you play with them. I remember getting into a get out square through 2 left element, and you see, you figure out real fast that left hand was not available. So that's the thing you want to use in your call analysis.
John Anthony, Havertown. Just a comment that I've been to 3 caller schools, and the second one I've been to, second and third one, we did the call analysis sheets. But everybody had to do it, and we actually had to compare. We actually got up and read the sheets. So everybody had a report of what the one person found in the analysis. And from that, it worked out fine because everybody was learning. You had 10 students in the class. We had 10 analyses done. And then from that, we learned how to do the analysis real nice and fast.
And at that point, basically the call analysis sheet is used in caller schools during the teaching time, because during the time of the school where we talk about teaching, because this is a teaching tool to help you understand that call and everything about that call that you're going to teach. And that's why you don't want to write them out on everyone. If you did, that'd be a great book for somebody to publish if you did that. But I make a lot of money if you printed a book like that, to tell you the truth. But the next thing is on teaching. Remember that there are people learn different ways. And so not only do you have to know how to teach it, of course, and what's the best way to teach it. Use the call analysis sheet to understand how to get into it and get out of it, whatever the call may be. But recognize also that people learn differently. Some people have to see the call. Some people want to read it. Some people want to hear. He wants you to tell them what to do. And other people want you to do a combination of these things. If you can, try to recognize amongst people in your classes how individual learn. Does he have to see it? Does she want to read about it? And try to tailor your course, your school, to no matter who they are, how they learn, how they learn best. You've got it. You're going to read it. You're going to tell them how to do it. You're going to show them how to do it. All these different, tailor your teaching method so it takes in all the different ways people learn. Programming, we talked about that a little bit. Basically, it's deciding what to call. How complex am I going to make it? How easy am I going to make it? How fast am I going to make it? How slow? Which one is going to come first and second and third? Am I going to feature this move in this call in this tip, and then feature this call in another tip? There's so many things about programming. It's the sort of thing you could go on for probably a whole week on nothing but programming if you really delve into it. Smooth delivery and body flow. We've talked about that. Learning the timing. Understanding the tempo, having an understanding of what these words mean and how they affect dancers. Not just what the words mean, but how all of these things affect dancers. The business of moving and availability of hands and body movement. If you're going this way, don't call something that send it back that way. Yeah, it's legal. And you can call it from there, but is it really smooth for dancers to be trying to do that? Voice. Under voice, you've got all sorts of things to be thinking about. It's your communication tool. The mood you can set with it, proper breathing. One of the things we talk to people I try to get out in every one of the schools I do is when you practice a singing call, you get a new singing call. Boy, this is a great singing call, and it works for my voice. It sounds good. I like this. I like the tune. Practice also, or make notes on the call sheet if you have to, where to breathe, because otherwise you get out there. And then right in the middle of a phrase, you have to stop and breathe because you forgot to breathe at the beginning of the phrase. So if you have to, make notes on the cue sheet. Breathe here. Take a breath or something. Put a comma. Yeah, whatever works for you. I think that's what somebody said before. Whatever works for you that will help you. Like when I have students, I teach them. I say, I'm going to tell you all of these hints about how to get through this call and what the pitfalls are in this call. But if the hint doesn't work for you, if hint A doesn't work but hint B does, then forget about hint A. Don't let hint A confuse you. Just work on hint B worked for you. Good. That's the one I'm going to use to help me remember how to get through this call and how to execute this call. Projection. This little gizmo here, right, is going to help out a whole lot. But if all you do is talk like this all the time, it's going to be tipping. But if you want to be commanding, you'll say, "Alaman left," or "heads." So you want to make sure that it's the heads that understand the command is coming to them, and that's projection through a microphone. It's projection and volume are not the same thing. Volume sometimes muddies things up. Projection should help you deliver smoothly, deliver correctly. It's timing. We talked about timing again. There is a timing chart. It's a downloadable document right there on the CALLERLAB sheet on the CALLERLAB website. Bring that down and understand that. And not only understand the timing sheet itself, but understand in your mind visualizing dancers dancing through a call and when to deliver the next call. Some of the people who newer dancers or newer callers the last couple of nights calling, you could tell because they were the head square through and a right and left through, veer left. And well, they haven't even gotten through the second hand of the square through, and the caller is saying do a right and left through. So you got to be able to, number one, visualize. Number two, know that a square through takes 10 beats. And number three, you got to be able to visualize it in your head and watch your dancers because some of them may be slower and some of them may be faster. How many people have a youth group? What's going to happen there? They're going to learn faster and they're going to move faster. How many people call for seniors? Other way around, right? It's got to be slower. Well, I've been calling for seniors for 20 years and they're 25 years in Tucson, and I wind up leaving out do-si-dos a lot because that gives them the extra time to get through the rest of the thing, and that's something you have to learn about the dancer, about your dancers and your situation, and that comes with timing. First beat calling and pre-calling. Try to give the dancers the first beat. You know, if you're going to say grand square, of course everybody knows you got to go 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, side space, grand square, 1. They get that first beat. And I've tried to do it wrong, and I just can't. You know, maybe some people can do it wrong for demonstration purposes. I have a terrible time doing it, but you want to be sure that you give that. And the same goes for other calls too. Try to hit that first beat for dancers on like a square through or a swing through. It's difficult because you've got odd timing in there sometimes for the individual calls, but try to give them the first beat. It'll make their dance experience more rewarding for them. You want to take questions now, or just maybe finish this up real quick? 2 more things real quick. Leadership. I believe that leadership is done best by example. And the story I have to tell there is a club I started calling for over 20 years ago. Was in our area was looked at as an unfriendly club. They always get into the groups, and when new people come in, I said, well, okay, I'm changing that. I stood at the door for the first 6 or 8 months that I was calling for them and said hello to everybody that came in. And I also stood at the door at the end of the dance and said goodbye to everybody. Thanks for coming, and tried to mingle as much as I could. I do rounds as well as squares, so I couldn't mingle as much during the dance. But get the idea across to their club and to your groups that they've got to be friendly with these people. So pretty soon we had more people coming to the dance, and the unfriendly reputation was gone. But it took a little bit of doing by me doing it for them to say, oh, hey, this seems to be working. Well, we'll give that a try. So if you call yourself a leader, everybody's putting you on a pedestal. That's a quote from here. They're going to put you on. Take this thing in your hand and you stand up on the stage and you put a record on. You're on a pedestal, and you're supposed to know more. Not that you're going to be uppity and snippety and snooty about it. But you're just supposed to know more. And they will expect that sort of thing. You have dancers ask you questions. Try to be available for a question and answer period or questions from them. If you don't know the answer, don't make something up, because then you've got everybody watched Leno's Tonight Show, jaywalking. Yeah, what do? They ask him a question, and they don't know the answer, so they make up what really turns out to be one of the stupidest things. Some of the stupid things. How many? See that flag up there? How many stars are on it? And I remember this one gal answered, "I can't tell. It's moving." Well, it's an American flag. So, it's odd. But anyhow, if you don't know the answer to a question a dancer has, look it up. Research it yourself. Get the answer and get back to them with that answer. And of course, very important, develop a sense of which, especially if you're calling for this group all the time, what they like and what they don't like, what's good and what's bad for them. Sometimes what's bad for them is what's really good for them, but they don't know it. So you need to, well, if they don't want to, if they say this is what we want to dance all the time, but then they go other places and they complain they can't dance when they get there. Well, they can't dance when they get there because they want vanilla at home all the time. So you have to slowly work in some things that maybe they hadn't heard before, but take it gently and take it slowly, and they'll come around. Last but not least, there's about 3 or 4 pages in the handout I put together. One of them is this, the Code of Ethics. Please this is another downloadable document from the CALLERLAB website. Have you ever seen this before or downloaded it yourself? If you haven't, please do that and at least read through this thing. This is what we're supposed to live by. And it's been updated recently to add the business of music and copying music. Please don't do that. I'm a record producer, and I really would rather sell you something than have you buy something and have somebody get it. Somebody get it for you. Here, copy mine. Desert Gold is the label we use, by the way. So anyhow, we read over that the Code of Ethics and understand it. And if you have questions about it, ask people. I understand what this means. Then ask. And you call the home office. The home office will maybe put you in touch with the caller coach, or maybe the home office will have the answer directly. But call them up and see what they can help, how they can help you. Okay, we had a couple of questions. Or anybody else you wanted? Questions, comments?
Dan Faust from Norwich, New York. And this may be a very basic question, but words mean a lot to me, and I need you to define what you mean by giving the dancers the first beat. Does that mean you call the call so they can step on the first beat, or does that mean you wait for the first beat and then? So can you speak more to giving them the first beat and pre-calling?
Grand Square is the example that is best in my mind to use on this thing. Most of the music we use is 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2, and they're 8-beat phrases. So you want the words sides face grand square. It's 4 words. Each one takes 1 beat to say. So if you go in an 8-beat phrase, you go 1 2 3 4 sides face grand square. They get the first beat to take the step on. Rather than you holding that first beat back, or you going 1 2 3 4 5 6 sides face grand square, they get beat 3, and it's not the same rewarding dance experience as if they gave them as you gave them the first beat. It's not going to be the same rewarding dance experience, smooth dance experience for them. The other one is the very first thing you call. And you can do it again. You've got this 8-beat phrase to deal with. Bow to the partner in the corner is all. And that takes bow to the partner, corner is all. Circle to the left, go round the hall. That's 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. You've squeezed all that into 8 beats. And then give them a little time to circle. Give them maybe 2 beats to circle and say, Alaman left. Boom. They get beat 1 to do the Alaman left. And a right and left grand. The Alaman left takes about 4 beats to get around. Boom. They'll get beat 1 to do the right and left grand. Okay? And pre-calling is mostly in singing calls you run into this. There'll be at the end of the figure, for instance, the first figure, at the end of the opener, if the first figure starts off a square through, but it's a little bit longer than 64 beats, then and you want to also give the dancer that first beat. It'll be as you finish the figure or the tagline for the opener, you'll finish that with the first 4 words with the words head square through 4, and then they're right into it. And there's some singing calls that are done like that. And Old Bones. Anybody have that song, Old Bones, the one that George Burns did years ago? That's one that it's got a pre-called figure in it, and it's available I'm pretty sure it's available still in Palomino. It's not that old anymore. So if you want to hear what a pre-call singing call is like, buy that and listen to the call side. Without music, it's difficult to do. One more question. Did that take care of everything you had? Okay.
Hello, this is David Avera from Bowie, Maryland. I've had a little trouble using that timing sheet. For instance, it lists walk around your corner 8 beats. it doesn't take people 8 beats to do that. If I give them 8 beats, they stand around twiddling their thumbs for a few beats. And for instance, if I'm in a 0 box and I call it chicken plucker, if I actually give them the 6 beats to do the right and left through, they wind up twiddling their thumbs for a beat or so. So I wind up using other tricks to end up timing it right. But
such as?
If you're doing like a right and left through, when they're halfway through the courtesy turn, that's when you do the next call.
Okay.
If you're doing a swing through, I think when they join hands in the middle, that's when you do the next call.
Well, I don't necessarily think that's tricks. That would be calling so that you give them the time. You're giving them the proper amount of lead time for that group to get into, or command time for them to do what they have to do.
Yeah, I guess people wound up telling me these tricks when I was in calling school, or telling me these techniques. I don't think they're written down anywhere. Is there anyway a listing of I guess things you can do to time out, especially like if you've got dancers that don't move as fast as they used to anymore, and they won't necessarily match the sheet. You need to do something else to know when it'll flow for them.
Yeah. Well, the timing sheet is those were developed over a period of time, and they may not necessarily work for your group. Like I said before, I've got a senior group, and a 64-beat singing call for me is really about a 62-beat singing call. But they take the 64 beats, 58 or 59 beats rather, they take the whole 64 beats to get through it because they're moving a little slower. So the timing chart is not an absolute. It's not an absolute. Like the water freezes at 32 degrees. Well, that's an absolute. That's going to happen. But a square through taking 10 beats, a swing through taking 6 beats, a right and left through, that may or may not be good. They are guidelines. Please use these things really, I think, as guidelines rather than, well, it says here in this chart you're supposed to take 6 beats. Well, you take more or you take less. You're out. You can't dance here. That's not going to work either. So, yeah, one more in the back.
François Desmarais, Ottawa. Personally, I like to videotape the sessions, and the caller let me do that. And when I replay that, that's where I notice I have the opposite problem. Let's say, for example, if I videotape, I hear the command, and let's say it's 2 ladies change, it's supposed to be 8 beats, and I count the people, 1, 2, 3, 10, 11, 12, or what the timing sheet sometimes does not take into account is that it seems that there's like sometimes they need 2 beats to set up to go from one move to the other. Like they pause, they look at one another, and then they do it. So therefore, you have to shorten your choreography because even though it's 64 beats, they waste 6 or 8 beats doing the figuring out where they're supposed to be or where their corner is, and so on and so forth. So that's one situation that I'm finding I have to deal with a lot.
Are these newer dancers?
Mostly.
Yeah, that's the reason. Because they're not moving instinctively.
But even some experience, I've seen, why does it take him that long? You've been dancing for 5 years, Well,
if they're going to be again, I think the timing sheet needs to be used as a guide, and not as a Bible, this is the amount of beat period that is going to be more or less with your group, depending on your group. Yeah. And remember, keep in mind, you are an entertainer. If you're there to entertain people, they want to be. If you're hired to entertain them, well, then that's what you're supposed to do. And if giving them a little bit more or a little less time, as the case may be, to do a call, then that's what you have to do. I don't throw out all the ethics and don't throw out all the standards, but entertain the people. Give them, if they need more time because of, for whatever reason, then give them a little more time. But try to give them the right amount of time and see what happens. Go ahead, Barry.
Barry Clasper again. Just to expand a little bit on Ron's point, the timing charts are guidelines. They're expected normal something around the right point kind of timings. But the fact is that timings you're going to get on the floor will always vary for whatever reason. We've already talked about, the differences between calling to teenagers and calling to seniors. If you're calling to people dancing on carpet, it's going to be different to people dancing on a floor. There's all kinds of things that are going to affect the number of beats it takes them to execute something. The thing to really remember is that dancers perceive it to be smooth when they know how long it's going to take or how long you're going to give them. So if you start to consistently give them the same amount of time in the same sort of situation for the same call, they will start to take that many beats. At least the ones that hear the music will. And it's actually your job to take whatever conditions you're faced with and smooth that floor out so that they eventually are all dancing to the music. And if it takes them 6 beats to do something that the timing charts should take 4, and they always get 6 beats, they'll take 6 beats, and they'll dance it smoothly, and they'll perceive it as a smooth dancing experience. And I look at timing as being a communication between the caller and the dancers. The dancers have their issues on the floor to deal with that are going to cause them to take, more or less time as they see fit. You need to communicate to them how long you're going to give them to do certain calls by kind of establishing what you think is reasonable in your own mind and then calling to that. And it's not at all uncommon when you first start calling, particularly to a floor that doesn't know you very well. They're a little ragged because they're not used to your voice. They're not used to the way you phrase things and the order that you might put words in and that sort of thing. But you need to gradually crisp up your timing so that you're taking them to a point where they're feeling that it's really smooth and that things are moving to the music. And whether that's according to the timing charts or not doesn't matter. Those folks are starting to have a good time.
Let me go through a couple of checklist thoughts if you'll take some time with me and kind of let you use a little checking point. This is just to kind of put your mind in a reflecting as to things that you should be able to do or have already done yourself. Number one, you should never call a movement that you cannot teach. Stop and think, can you do it from the boys' side and can you do it from the girls' side? If you cannot dance the girls' side, then what am I asking you to start doing? Learn the girl side, even if you've got to go through a call for a certain period of time. Those of you that started calling, did you dance at least 1 year, maybe 2 years before you started calling? Show of hands, yes. Can you dance one level above where you call? If you cannot do it, then the reason why, you put in your mind some more trade thoughts that you can put together so you can see relationships a little bit easier because you've had the advantage of going through that higher level and learning some information. If you're dancing mainstream, if I understand your situation, or you dance plus, then learn advanced, A1 and A2. Okay? Know the time, it takes time, but what it gives you a little bit of control, and it gives you a little bit of more reflex on the floor and builds your confidence because when you eventually start calling, you'll have a better handle on what you can do. Okay? Next, when you dance, have you danced out of your local area to other callers? You can learn so many tricks from these other people that you can see somehow of things. Go to when they teach. Watch how they teach. How many of you have ordered and have in your possession the teaching manual that comes from American Square Dance Society? You have that little brown manual that's about this thick. If you do not, you can get it from Palomino. Call him. Let them send it back to you. Look at this. It starts with call 1, circle to the left, and it goes all the way through recycle. And it gives examples, and it gives built-in choreography for you to use for what you've already learned, and then you start teaching a new call. It helps the dancers and your own particular thoughts to develop something. Another thing is how many of you have picked up, yes, it's from the American Square Dance Society. It's a book on teaching. And if you'll just ask Tom for the teaching manual, it's a brown manual, unless they've changed it, that can be used about, 2 inches now, 2 inches, 2.5 inches thick, that you can use for itself. Another one here that you need to think of, it's available from CALLERLAB, and it's called the CALLERLAB Starter Kit for Newer Callers. In it has got a lot of concrete thoughts. It's got formations. It's got the arrangements. It's got timing charts. It's got some things that Barry talked about earlier about smooth dancing, body flow, kinesthetics, things that you need to reflect into your mind and look at and really think about from a studying standpoint. I mentioned earlier, how many of you have a mentor that you're working with now? If you do not, I strongly suggest that you see if there's some person in your local area, male or female caller, and ask them to work with you, give you suggestions, travel with them back and forth. When I first started, here's the way I got into it. I was a clogger for a couple of years. When I learned clogging, my wife and I were trying to get out and do something as a couple. Through that, we met square dancers. Through the square dancing, we seemed to enjoy watching what the square dancing was, and I said, I like that. I think I'll go into it. I was a math minor in college. Once we got into that, they started doing singing calls, and I said, I did a couple of years, and I was in college and played in a rock and roll band. I sang in the rock and roll. I think I want to try that. So here it sparkled my interest, and I did a singing call on a dare. Well, you know, you do it first time and you're hooked and everybody pats you on the back of the back. We all been there and done that. Now your head's about 5 watermelons too thick, right? And at this point in time you're saying, okay, I think I'll go just a little bit further. The mentoring will help you to really bring you back down to earth and let him concretely work with you. Let him be able to say, okay, next week, John, teach so-and-so fourth call. Can you dance it first of all? Do you know where it starts and stops? All variations. That's why your analysis of call comes in so important. You can pick it up from that standpoint. How many of you can do a one-night, they used to call them one-night stands, now we're calling them square dance parties. How many of you have done square dance parties? If you came to this class again, all hands would be raised. Betsy Gotta now with the Caller Coach Group is working on a new program that's going to be involving some ideas that you can pick up and start using for this. Okay? So if you'll talk with her just a little bit later on, you can get an idea about this. The beauty of the one-night stand, if you want to call it that from the old-timers, or if you want to call it the square dance parties, you get a first-hand impression to those people of what square dancing is like. If you do a good job, they come away with the best feeling in the world. And you don't have to do very much. If you'll take your caller teaching leadership thoughts, you can come down the first 10, 11 calls at the most and work it through for the whole evening. So you do the call, circle left, over and over. They don't know this. It's a brand new language to them. A do-si-do. They don't know what you're talking about. How many of you can do a do-si-do from a static with a couple as a couple do-si-do? Have you thought about taking the partner of yours and doing a couples from the head position? Heads do a do-si-do. Sides do a do-si-do. Okay? You can just build on the night and just have a wonderful time with the dancers, and you've not done a whole lot. Simple calls. One-night stands also can provide you a wonderful income. How many of you can believe making $500 in a night for a square dance party? Those of us that do them, I do them quite often. I do them for churches and YMCA groups and boys and girls and a whole bunch of other things that we do these all the times. And they'll call you up and say, Paul, what do you charge for this? And my first answer is, what's in the budget? Well, we got $600 scheduled for this year. Would $500 be enough? Well, I think I can work on $500. Seriously. If you haven't thought about this, you gain, they gain. The problem gets to be when you do large groups, and we do quite a few of these outside boy-girl groups in these camps up in the mountains. You'll get 200, 300 coming in, and you're outside, or maybe you're on a gym floor in our case. That presents a problem. So you've got to go in armed. Can you do line dances? Does everybody here know how to do line dances? Can you do a Virginia reel? Can you do, listen to this, the tootie-ta? Do you know what the tootie-ta is? Go over and ask your local kindergarten teacher, do you have music for the tootie-ta? Did you hear what I said? Kindergarten teacher for the tootie-ta. And you get up there on the floor and you do it in front of these people, or you do it out there in the center of the floor and they're all facing you to the center and you say, follow my hand movements. And they will laugh and scream. Adults, we do it for every time we have a graduation. We have the new graduating dancers out there on the middle of the floor for everybody else to watch, and we do the Tootie-Todd. T-O-D-A-D-L. I think that's what how it's spelled. Tootie-Todd. You can put it on your iPod Touch or take it around with you and do some of these items, and you'll have a ball.
I think the Tootie-Todd is on the CD, Dancing for Busy People. I believe that's the title.
Okay, there's I had it written down. If I think about it before we get through here, I'll be able to come back to you. Do you have your local clubs? Will they respond and let you? I'm assuming that some of you do not have clubs at this point. Do some of your local clubs let you become a caller to them with a mentor caller and give you a chance to exercise what you're doing? If you do not, see if you can find a club that will help you for this situation. What it does is it gives you that chance to promote yourself. If you cannot, then see if you can find a 4-couple group, have them over to your house, buy them lunch, supper, breakfast, whatever, and spend an hour or 2 hours on a regular basis learning how to do it. Now, here's what I would suggest you learn to do if you haven't already done this earlier. I know some of the ones have been in classes yesterday on the modules and others. First of all, learn how to get in square through 4 to a 0 box. Then learn how to do the chicken plucker back and forth. Then do what we call invert and rotate. So you change this dancing east-west to north-south. Then learn how to convert, how to change a 0 box to a 0 line. We all know how to do this. Then we know how to change a 0 line by invert and rotate from east-west to north-south. Pass through, bend the line, do a right and left through. How do you convert this 0 line back to a 0 box? These are all 1, 2, 3, 4s that if you can master, you can do a whole tip on just those 4 with a little 0 in between. 0 being at a 0 box, swing through, boys run, Ferris wheel, what's left? Centers pass through. Hear it? And you put these things together, okay? Now, at this point in time, you're probably going to feel like I'm a $5 caller, $10 caller. But give yourself some time, and eventually you'll make your way on up the line. There's a sheet here that I've got that's called, if I can find it, here it is, Goals and Their Attainment. We give this out at Caller School, and what it starts off in the back side is experience in square dancing, 1, 2, 3, 4 or more years. How many have been dancing at least 3 to 4 years before you got in the calling? Okay, we would suggest to you that you dance a little level above that. Then here's how it would work up. Have you attended a square dance vacation? Have you attended a square dance festival? Have you gone to a national square dance? Do you desire to be a caller? Well, you must have, or you wouldn't be sitting in here. Going on up the list, have you done your first singing call? Your first patter call? I bet you made $35 in your first patter call, didn't you? Came so easy for you, right? And that microphone was going like this the whole time, right? Everybody's just having a good time. Do you know the 75 basics, forward and backwards? Should say all hands up. Stop and think. You're professional, like Ron said earlier, in front of everybody up front. That's what they're thinking, of you at this point in time. Do you call, have you been a replacement caller for other callers? Do you teach for a club? Working on up. Can you call 1 night a week? Are you calling 2 nights a week? Have you called for a local festival? Hear it? These are goals you can start setting for yourself and making yourself go 1 step higher and 1 step higher. Okay? Have you called for an out-of-state festival? Have you called it a weekend vacation camp? Have you been president of your Callers Association? Have you been president of your Callers Association? Have you cut a square dance record? You see it? You're putting thoughts in your mind and building yourself up for goal attainment. And you can make those goals. You're the one setting those goals. You're the one right there that says, I can do it. The problem gets to be, if you're married, Do you and the wife, or do you, if you're the wife or the caller and your husband, are both of you in agreement that you can call and go forward and they support you? If you've got problems there, rethink it and talk it over again. Because one side is going to pull you this way, that's your ego, and this side is going to say, you've got 2 kids at home, you need to work a second job to make some more money. You hear those thoughts, they go on. That's nature. That's where you are in terms of things. So you've got to feel good from that standpoint. If you've gone to a caller school for the first time, give yourself about 2 or 3 years. Any of us coaches and then work with you before know that give yourself 3 or 4 years and then get back to another caller school, a different caller school if you can, to learn something different from what you learned the time before. You'll pick up a lot of things in the meantime. Believe it or not, you'll have some habits that you probably have developed that probably need to be fine-tuned and changed just a little bit. You'll have to look at yourself from your skill level. If you think of yourself as a person that on a daily basis as a salesperson gets out, generates, makes calls, is on commission, you're forcing yourself to do things like this and you're orderly. If you're not this type of a person, you may have to restructure your mind and work your thoughts accordingly and change it. It all depends on where you are individually from working a job standpoint. Get a small notebook. Carry it around with you at all times. When you hear somebody call something and you think, boy, that really, like I know Barry had said earlier, does it flow good? You want to know why it flowed good. Write it down. Go home. Practice it. Someone earlier said, I record myself. I think it was back here. If you don't do this, start doing it. Yes, you hear your voice and it sounds so wonderful to you right now. But you play it back and it may surprise, you may say, who is that calling that? Don't quit your day job here. Just listen to what you hear. And then this is why the mentor is good for you. Okay? When you travel with your records and things, how many of you take your records with you and go inside and have them always available? When you go to another club and you're now, in your mind, a $45 caller, do you carry your records inside and you put them down there on the podium where the caller can see it? No. From an ethical standpoint or from a courtesy standpoint, you want to know, yes, would you be recognized to call? How would you then, in the mind of this new person up on stage that doesn't know you, what could you might do to introduce yourself? Talk with them a little bit, maybe talk with the president of the club. First of all, saying, is it okay to do this? Some clubs you're going to run into are going to do what? Nope. Can't do it. See? But if you get the word around that, yes, you're working into new calling, and if you have clubs in your local area that support you, great. You come over, they will like to hear you. You can start off with a singing call, I'm sure, the first time, and eventually you'll come back and maybe do the next time you do another singing call. If a person's going to mentor with me, I won't let you do the same singing call every time you come. I want to challenge you to do the singing call differently every time. And I don't want the same calls either. I don't want all country western. I want it changed and varied. I want a little bit of rhythm and blues. I want a little bit of ups. I want a little bit of downs, because you've got to learn how to command the floor. Eventually you'll be working themes. You'll be working festivals. You'll be doing 50s dancing. You'll be doing some old time things. You'll be doing things that people want, asking differently of you. You know, one night's going to be a Valentine's night, so you got to have something that's different from that standpoint. How many are members of your local callers association? Do you support it? Do you have workshops at your local callers association? Do you demand that you have a workshop leader so that someone is going to bring up something new in your workshop at all times? You need this, so you need to learn and develop skills, and that's the best place to pick up some things and share it. Your people that have been calling for a long period of time will gladly be able to give you information. Be willing to pay your dues with sweat equity and volunteer for everything that you can think of. got to be recognized, but the people have to realize from your standpoint, are you willing to put out the effort it takes by helping them as it does for them offering the situation for you to do something?
Dan Faust, Norwich, New York. I'm somewhat confused at a statement that you said, and all I continuously hear is that square dancers are concerned about our sport. It's a dying sport. You can't get dancers to come to the dances. However, I just heard you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there are clubs that won't let another caller call. And that's a little shocking. And so my question is that because of the contract they have with their caller, or is it because they just won't allow that? And if you're not, I find that a little conflicting, because if you're not going to allow another caller to call, then how are you going to promote square dancing and the continuing of our sport when you're so worried about dancers or people not wanting to learn how to dance? Seems a little conflicting to me, and I'd like to know why there are clubs out there that would not allow that.
All I'm trying to do is just give you a reality of where some clubs are. I don't think the majority of clubs will help new callers, but you're going to find an occasional situation. And let's be honest, too. You're going to find some callers that are established that are going to feel what? Threatened. And the feeling of threatenedness is, I think, our mistake. We should never be that way. If we're promoting new people to come into the activity of square dancers, where do the callers generally come from? Square dancers, right?
And there is, I know of one club that has a contract with their caller that says he will be the caller for every dance they do. In that case, you don't stand a chance, because it's in his contract. He's violating his contract with them if he has somebody else call. If he's not there, they shut down.
Yeah, John Anthony again. We have a club caller that teaches classes. And when I finished the first caller school, I was offered about 15 minutes at the instructional class to do a hash call and a singing call with the students. Then he got nervous. He doesn't do it now. As far as the club goes, they came through, and if the caller agrees, I'm allowed to do a tip. And I also belong to what we call the novice chorus group. There's 3 of us here that belong to that. And we get together once a month, and we take turns up on the mic, and we criticize each other critique each other on the class.
Yeah, this is where your local callers associations can help you a lot. If you say no on some, if you have a good callers association, don't have one.
That's
why we got together ourselves.
Good for you. Good for you. Yeah, he's already explained here things can come up. And sadly enough, right there, this does happen. I don't think it's the regular routine. I just say ever so often this will arise that way. Good questions. Any others?
Thanks. Steve Anderson, Winston-Salem, North Carolina. When I first started calling, the guy that was calling for our club told me, he said, don't take your records in to another club with you. He said, leave them in the car. But he said, you go in and you let him know that you're a caller, and then if he asks you, would you like to do a tip? Then you go out and get your records. But if you bring your records in, at least in the area where we're at, he said, that's an intimidation to the caller. In other words, you're coming in pridefully somewhat and saying, I want to do a tip here. You see, and he said it's better to let them ask you than for you to come in and act like, well, I'm going to call a tip now.
Yeah. In our local area, of course, all the ones know that I do a lot with callers, new callers. And I've gone around to every one of the callers there, and I say, you will support these fellas. I said, you are exactly where these people are right now, and they demand nothing less than what you were giving yourself. And you've got to help these people out. Any of these guys could have a heart attack, a stroke tomorrow, and they're not on the scene. And you're out there on the front lines, show it. But be professional when you get ready to do this. Know your singing calls. When you work on the singing call, how many people work it 5 times and then say, I'm great? Let me work it 10 times and say I'm great. 15? 20? I suggest no less than 20. You got to own that call. Ken?
Ken Ritucci, Massachusetts. In New England years ago, we used to have a problem with, and it was a problem with a couple of newer callers who would really just come right in and plop their record box. At the time, it was a record box. They didn't plop their laptop down. And they plopped their record box right on the stage, and they almost demanded to call. I like to tell newer callers, look, I know you want to call. You know that I've been through it, but I always say you got to show some professionalism here too. Like he had said, don't expect to call, but at least go in, and if you don't know the caller, if you're new to the club, if it's the club caller, normally it's up to some of you are saying it's up to the club. Normally I have found it's up to the club caller. And the club caller will either let you call or won't let you call. If there's a guest caller calling for the night, if I was in your shoes, I wouldn't expect to be asked to call because that's not your time. They're paying someone to come in and call the dance. So don't, now if it happens, fine. I do it in New England sometimes because everybody knows me, and the clubs have we have a young kid coming along, and I'll say to the club, do you mind if, this guy calls, and they don't care. But, I ask because it's not my club. But, you got to be careful of that. You don't want to be too pushy. Your chance will come. Things will happen. This is not a sprint. It's a marathon, and you got to take it one step at a time. Your opportunity will come. Something will happen. Somebody will get sick. Somebody will move. There you go.
Thank you.
We are out of time. I would suggest that y'all go home, register for next year's convention for a continuation of this interest session. Thank you all for coming.
If you thought this was one last word about it,